I'm not Elvis Presley.
We also record your presentation, your lecture, so anyone can listen to it later on when we finish it in the coming weeks.
Okay.
So welcome, good morning, Arch, and welcome everybody from different cities of Turkey and from other countries. Today we have a very special guest, Arch Woodside. I know he doesn't like to be called as a professor. He likes to be, pronounced by his name as Arch. So he's a very, informal and friendly
That's fine.
colleague. Good. And yes, so your background is, I think, Arch, psychology at the university.
I'm sorry, say again?
Your background is in psychology?
Yeah. My degrees are all in business administration, but I'm a fellow of American Psychological Association, and also.
Yeah, I know. You are the fellow of American Psychology Association, the Royal Society of Canada, and also the International Academy for the Study of Tourism.
Yeah.
And you created, I think this is what I know from our personal communication before, you created International Journal of Culture, Hospitality and Tourism.
Yes.
2005 in Canada, I remember that one. And then the second journal, Global Scholars of Marketing Science. I'm not editor, but I think you created that journal as well.
Right.
And you're also the former editor of Journal of Business Research.
Yeah.
I know you don't like to talk too much about your citations, but you have more than 30,000 citations with a Arch index of 78 now. And Arch has more than 450 articles, and I'm sure many or all of them are in good journals. So today I checked his article published in Journal of Business Research in 2016. The title was about the manifesto. I think as far as what I can see from the title for the presentation, Arch will be talking about how we can move from or shift from bad practices to good practices in consumer behavior and marketing research. That will be more, I think, helpful for the academia and for the society in the future. Yes, Arch.
Thank you. Thank you, Metin. And thank you for the invitation to speak. And the title here is Shifting Away from 12 Pervasively Bad to Valid Science Practices. And I'm sure I could talk about this for 2 or 3 days. And so this is going to be rather quick, but I want to urge you, if you have some, if you would like to receive any of the articles I'm going to mention, just write to me and ask, and I'll send them to you the same day. And here's some pictures of Metin. Different ages. I think the age on the right is younger. No, older.
No, the right one, I think, talked 14 in Istanbul, and the left one was in our symposium, CPTHI symposium in Brussels.
In what year?
In Belgium, I think it was 15. No.
Okay, so
he is about 18.
Yeah, okay, so 4 years apart, and as you can see, he's ageless, and it's a wonderful trait to have. I used to be ageless, but it finally caught up to me. So look, this is one of the articles I would really recommend. This is 2016, the Good Practices Manifesto, Overcoming Bad Practices, Pervasive in Current Research in Business. And I think hopefully, I'm so glad you're here, and I hope additional people will hear some of the things I have to say today, because I'm really out to change your total way of thinking and what you do in research. And I'm one of the small group but growing group that that recognizes that the key approach to handling data and building models is absolutely bad science practice. And I'm talking about multiple regression analysis and structural equation modeling, along with NHST, null hypothesis significance testing. You should not be doing these methods, and there's several reasons why. And even the American Statistical Association makes the point that NHST, null hypothesis significance testing, is bad science. And we're going to talk about this. I want to stress, so if it's so bad, why do we do it? And why do we continue doing it? And we'll cover that. The other one, this is a recent paper, 2019. This is what you should be doing, accurate case outcome modeling. And this is modeling for point outcome estimates or interval estimates instead of VDR. VDR is variable directional relationships, which is what you do with NHST, such as structural equation modeling. And I'm not saying never do SEM, but the reason to do SEM is because reviewers expect it, even though it's bad. Now, so I think you in today's climate, you need to give it to them, but then also give them something good. And you know, it's ridiculous, but that's the situation we're in right now. And this is the third one that just was published in 2021 with my colleague Ilias Pappas. This is fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis, guidelines for research practice in information systems and marketing. This was published in the A-Star journal in the ABDC list. And ABDC is the Australian Business Deans Council and journal list. And they have about 800 journals in the list, and they're divided into A-Star, A, B, and C. And in terms of quality ranking. And so this is a particularly good article if you'd like to learn how to do asymmetric testing. We'll talk about the meaning of that in a minute. And I raised the question here, is relevancy the issue? And Pham, the editor of the JCR at the time, reported that very few articles, less than 10%, get well cited. So by well cited, a well cited article would be 10 or more citations. Citations is a measure of impact. And so 70% of the articles get cited less than two or less times. Let me say that again, 70% of articles get cited less than 2% of the time. So at some point, you'd like to have your papers cited, you know, universities count placement, what journals you publish in, more important than citations, but at some time, you like to see your work have impact in your life, I would imagine. Pham talks about the 7 sins of consumer psychology roots, relevancy shortcomings. I don't think relevancy is the problem. Articles can, of course, be sometimes more relevant, but the real issue is quality of the method and data analysis. And so I would say we really need to study bad practices because, believe it or not, most articles have 4 or 5 huge problems with them. And I'd like to talk to you about those today. And the reason I'm stressing that is because of this quote. And this is from Gigerenzer. He was the head of the Planck Institute in Berlin of Human Development. He's still active. He has about 80,000 citations. He's about 68 years old. And this quote is, "Scientists' tools are not neutral." And what does that mean? And here's what it means. The method applied informs theory constructed. So if you're doing multiple regression analysis, you're going to end up having VDR hypothesis. Remember, VDR is variable directional hypothesis, variable direction relationship hypothesis, and that's not good. It's not detailed enough, and there's several problems with it. I'd like to mention those briefly with you today. So again, if you think in terms of regression analysis, you're going to end up with as X goes up, Y goes up, and that's really not sufficient. In biology and in chemistry and physics, we talk about point estimates, outcomes. That's really what we need to be doing in marketing and in tourism. Point estimates or interval estimates. For example, quintile, discretizing your data into quintiles and looking at the top quintile, the top 20%, and as an outcome. For example, if you have purchase behavior, you look at the top, or visit behavior. Who are the loyal customers as measured by the top quintile? And instead of looking at variable directional relationships, this permits also you building models of predicting the bottom quintile persons. In asymmetric modeling, which is what I'm going to briefly talk to you about today, is a case-based model, not variable-based model, but case-based model, and using conditions. For example, well, just quickly, you would never marry someone using a model prediction of how well the marriage is going to turn out, of variable directional relationship. You look for specific conditions that person may have, and such as, say you're a man and you're heterosexual and you're looking for someone who is beautiful, as you define beautiful. So you're not looking, comparing ugly and beautiful. You're a condition, a precondition to marriage would be, say, somebody who is in the top quintile on beauty, plus maybe you like to see them have a college degree. That would be another condition. So where education is a variable, having a college degree would be a condition. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but what I'm suggesting to you is that we model by conditioned antecedent conditions instead of variables. It's a different way of thinking. It may seem like a small change, but it's a huge difference. VDR is symmetric analysis, variable directional relationship, and case-based modeling is asymmetric modeling based upon antecedent conditions and specific interval outcomes. So look, I would recommend reading Gigerenzer before you die. He's like Babe Ruth of science, and he's easy to read. He writes better than me, and he's a German in Germany, and he still writes better than me. Talk about in English. He's an unbelievable scientist, and he's written several books, including Simple Heuristics That Make Us Smart. Isn't that a lovely title? Simple Heuristics That Make Us Smart. So look, this is the rectangular distribution, and so high X down here gives you high Y, but high X also gives you low Y. And same thing with low X. And you can think of X as a single variable, or you can think of it as a complex variable. And we'll talk about this also today. You see the correlation is 0 here, all right? And so that's a rectangular distribution. That's the upper left-hand XY plot. Here's a linear relationship, simple or complex X, and this is shows a sufficient and necessary condition. X is a necessary condition because high X will give you high Y, and low X will give you no Y's at all. There's no cases here, and it's necessary because there is, if X is high, there is no low Y over here. Now this is asymmetric, and in asymmetric relationship, this basically is the outcome that we're looking for. High X gives you high Y. You don't really care about low X. Low X gives you high and low Y. That's irrelevant to the issue. If high X consistently gives you high Y, you're very happy because the model works. So in asymmetric modeling, simply the question is, does high X give you high Y? End of story. That's it. So say you're hiring a faculty member. When you go look for a job, they're going to be looking for 3 or 4 things, particularly if they're a research university. They're going to expect to see some research output and some evidence of good teaching and evidence of service. And they like to have all 3 things. Now that's called a complex antecedent condition, where you have all 3 present. And it's really important to understand that when we model asymmetrically, we model using Bayesian algebra, not matrix algebra. Bayesian algebra. So, for example, what I just mentioned to you about teaching, research, and service, all 3 needs to be reasonably high, above 0.5 on what's called a calibrated scale. Have you ever heard of the expression calibrated scale? Calibrated scale? No. Okay. Well, calibrated scale goes from 0 to 1.0, 0 to 1.0. And what you do is you transform your original scale. Say you have age from 0 to 120, say, and you would transform that scale into a scale that goes from 0 to 1.0. So, and you would do it in such a way that you would have 2 inflection points. You would start age would start on the original scale up to 10, you would be very young. And then all of a sudden your age begins to grow more rapidly. So from 10 to what would be an inflection point. So the 10 would be equal to, on a calibrated score, 0.05. And then older age, you would have a second inflection point. Say it was 60, and at 60, your age starts to grow at a decreasing rate, and that inflection point would be a 0.95. So the point is, we transform data all the time from, you may have heard of a z-score. A z-score is a matrix algebra transformation. And for example, if we did a z-score right here in the room, Guzdi would be a +1 or a +2, because she's very young. And Emiton would be a minus 1 because he's rather old. And I would be a minus 3 because I'm very old. So a z-score typically ranges from +3 to -3, a z-score transformation. And look, we take all the data and transform it into z values. And we do that to get rid of the scale effect. For example, if you're measuring income and age, they have different scales. Income goes from, say, a 0 to $1 million. You know, forgetting about Bill Gates, or you transform Bill Gates into just give him a score of $1 million instead of what he actually earns, which would be, say, $1 billion, 500 million a year or whatever. But if you get rid of the scale, then you can compare the outcome. Your model permits you to compare the relative effects from a symmetric point of view with, and also it permits you to do Bayesian calculations with an asymmetric score. I want to tell you something. You're going to have to learn to be comfortable with multiple regression if you're going to be an academic, if you're going to get a PhD. And I would recommend a book in particular, Kurlinger and Pedhauser's first edition and, on multiple regression and behavioral sciences, because it's easy to read. But you're going to have to learn it because it's the language of science, multiple regression. But I'm also telling you, it's actually bad science practice. So, because everyone uses it in research, you need to learn how to do it, but then you need to learn how to do something good. And I'm going to show you how to do something good briefly. But look, this last one, panel D here, is called necessary but not sufficient. Necessary but not sufficient. For example, if X is high, Y is high and low. All right. So, but notice if X is low, there's nobody high. So, for example, if you're talking about looking for somebody beautiful to marry, say you're a guy, or if you're a woman and you're looking for a very handsome man, and you say, I have to have that as a condition to marry somebody. And Y is marrying someone, and X is being handsome, just being handsome. And so notice that this one case down here, this is a case, the dot. Somebody is very handsome, but you wouldn't marry them. And maybe you find out that they're violent and they like to, this person likes to beat women. So the point is, conditions can be necessary, but typically they're not sufficient. This is a breakdown of a necessary but not sufficient condition. And so the point I'm trying to make is that conditions is actually what research should be all about, not variable directional relationships, but conditions. And this is so for simple X or complex X. Say for example, X, instead of being handsome, X is a combination of being handsome and not violent. Okay, so it's a negative and a positive, handsome and not violent. And, but typically that's not enough to be marriage material. You know, I think we're all old enough to realize that relationships and marriage is complex, and we end up, half of us get divorced all the time. I've been divorced a few times now myself. And so some of my marriages have been disasters. because we build consciously or non-consciously, we build complex models of antecedent conditions. So X in real life is a complex statement. It's not a simple singular variable statement. So look, what I'm getting into is the fact that economics, marketing, tourism, psychology makes mistakes. And McCloskey, this is Deirdre McCloskey. She wrote a book in 2002, and then a little bit later with, she has another book, talks about the field of economics, all the research in the journals is nonsense, which future generations of economists are going to have to do all over again. Now, she's a very respected scholar in economics. Can you imagine somebody saying in your field that your stuff is rubbish? The whole field is rubbish? And she's famous for pointing this out. And other scholars don't disagree with her, but then they continue to publish rubbish and do research that's rubbish. So most of what appears in the best journals are unscientific and rubbish. And I find this unspeakably sad. So this is a quote by McCloskey. And what I'm saying to you is also relevant for marketing and tourism and psychology. And so, by the way, this is Deirdre. She's still alive, and you know, she's highly respected. And you know who this is? That's also Deirdre when she was Donald. So that's kind of interesting. She was transgendered, and so she was married when she was male and had two children, and they don't talk to her now because they're still in shock. So she became she published when she was he. So at one time she was Donald McCloskey, also a professor. And so she went through a transformation. And I'm suggesting to you that you read McCloskey. She's very, very good. You know, a really fine scholar. And she's a bit crusty and related to this whole point about symmetric analysis, meaning regression and SEM. All right, so look at this statement. It's shocking. This is a shocking statement. And principle, there's also no reason why theories in management and social sciences cannot yield precise or interval outcomes. Interval outcome is like the top quintile. When you apply for a job, you need to prepare yourself to try to be in the top quintile, you know, related to the job you're applying for. So this is a statement by Raymond Hubbard. He has a book entitled Corrupt Research, and it has a subtitle. And he points out that this line of thinking flies in the face of conventional wisdom that theories in these areas are unable to specify point predictions. Constructing case outcome theory with empirical analysis can provide an accurate prediction. I'm quoting myself down at the bottom here. This is somewhat precise outcome testing. And so that's what our theories need to do, and that's what we need to test empirically. By the way, this is a picture of Raymond Hubbard. My screen has your pictures on it, so I can't see them right now. But his book, that is very easy to read. It's a very good book. The problem with his book, and I've told him this, I've talked to him about this. The problem with his book is that he doesn't present what we should do. And you really need to talk about what we should do. So here's an example of asymmetric theory here, where I'm going to, let's see here. Okay. Shouldn't have done that. Let me do this for a second. Oh, good. Looks like we have some more people here. Let me, okay. You can't see this too well, but I can't see it too well. But this is pointing out that actually, Lou, I thought it was more than just being in the right place at the right time. Let me see if I can share this. Share screen here. Share screen. I think it was, being at the right place, the right religion, the right blah, having the right accent, right clothing, going to the right schools. And can you see this? Can everyone see this? And so this is a guy talking about how great he is because, for example, he's male and he's tall. And so these are peripheral things, but either consciously or non-consciously, we tend to use a configuration of ingredients or antecedents when we make evaluations. And in many countries, including Turkey, as well as United States, we overvalue being male, and women make less money, for example, than male, even though their performance is equal or even higher. Japan has this situation as well. And some countries work very hard to get rid of the bias against females, for example. Canada would be an example. Denmark would be another. South Korea would be a third. And so it's called gender mainstreaming. Now, I have 3 daughters. I think gender mainstreaming is a great idea, but that's beside the point. The point is we have complex configurations of antecedent conditions that we tend not to recognize, all of them, that affect a choice or a decision. I'm trying to get you to think a little bit in terms of complex antecedent conditions. Another name for that is recipes. When you make a pizza, you have a recipe of ingredients that go into the pizza, all right, a recipe of conditions. So this is what I'm trying to talk about. So let me, this is a precise point outcome prediction. Is also known as AKA, also known as a complex conditional antecedent model, a conjunctive model, a screen, you can call it a screen, or an asymmetric algorithm model. All these terms mean the same thing, okay? A recipe. All right. Now, Herbert Simon, who won the Nobel Prize in 1978 in economics, he makes the point that you can't beat something with nothing. That's been a big problem, that we tend not to teach PhD students about asymmetric modeling. All they learn is symmetric modeling, like regression analysis and structural equation modeling. But you have to present an alternative. So I'm suggesting that we take time to learn how to do asymmetric modeling. And in his address, you can pull this up for free online. He makes the point, replace and replacement 7 times at least in his speech, and he talks about replacing classical economics with behavioral economics, and he's talking about asymmetric modeling. He thought of himself as an empiricist in terms of asymmetric modeling, and so the point here is you need to learn to use asymmetric modeling as well as symmetric modeling. And the main reason to learn symmetric modeling is because this is the gold standard today, even though gold is actually rubbish in its value for theory construction as well as for practical insight, practical value. So here's a picture of Simon. You know, certain people make a huge difference in science. And this is a Nobel Prize winner. The second picture is shortly before his death. He died at 84. In your lifetime, he was working, but he died a few years ago. So, and this is Simon's impact. I can't read the top, but Simon has almost 400,000 citations. Now, most academics end up with less than 1,000 citations, or they might get to 2,000 citations. This guy had almost 400,000 citations. Notice that the Science of the Artificial has 14,640 citations. That's one publication. And his iconic work, this one has about 4,000, close to 4,000 citations. And you can pull this up on either Google Scholar, or you can pull this up on Publish or Perish. You know, again, he's an iconic scientist in behavioral economics, and very important scholar in terms of modeling thinking and how managers actually think, for example, decision makers think. And don't you think it would be valuable to take time to read him? And I'm suggesting that you do that. All right. ASA statement. American Statistical Association came out with a task force to evaluate the practice of using null hypothesis significance testing. And they concluded that by itself, a p-value does not provide a measure of evidence regarding a model or hypothesis. Isn't that shocking? We use null hypothesis significance testing, and ASA tells us, you know, it's not a good measure. So look, as soon as you see papers that are using t-tests as the main method of analysis, you know it's not going to be very good. And also it probably won't have much impact. So, so most researchers are unaware or wish to ignore the idea of replacing symmetric modeling with asymmetric case outcome modeling. And so the first question might be, why do we do it if it's so bad? And the ASA report says we do it because we teach it, and we teach it is because we do it. So it's circular reasoning. So we need to learn how to break out of this. So I would suggest you continue to do it because reviewers demand it, and getting your journal articles published. Now you will say, well, I won't publish journal articles, I'll write books. Well, books have a way of not lasting, but if with journal articles, they're easy to pull up. And so you have to put up with review even when they don't know what they're talking about. And I'm not saying all reviewers are idiots, but we tend to come across a few of them every time we submit papers, you know. So we have to train reviewers too. And one of the things to do is to please them by having symmetric tests, but then also have something good in it in your models, have asymmetric models. So symmetric models are bad for several reasons, and I list them in the lecture here. Whether or not you can reject the null hypothesis is not much, because it's easy to reject the null hypothesis. Scott Armstrong at Wharton shows that you can do that even using a table of random numbers as data. You hear what I just said? Using a table of random numbers as data, you can still have significance of your variables, even though they're not really variables, they're just random numbers. Because of the power of regression analysis mathematically, it'll produce good fit with the data in modeling. Even if the data is not real data, it's just table of random numbers. Another problem is that you actually get scan information, even if the correlation is highly significant statistically. And Anscombe, this is a famous article back from the 70s, and he points out that here's 4 data sets. You see these 4 data sets on your screen? 4 data sets, the outcome, the distribution, the XY plot. Notice that they're very different. The first one is positive linear, the second one is curvilinear, inverted U, the third is pretty linear except for this one case way up here. And the fourth one is the same value of X produces different values of Y except for this one case here. So the distributions are very different. But get this, the variance, the mean of X is 9 for all 4 sets of data. The variance is 11 for all 4 sets of data. The mean is 7.5 for all 4 sets of data. And the correlation is 0.82, very high for all 4 sets of data. So what I'm saying to you is correlation is not a very good measure of information from data. Now, this is called Anscombe's quartet. Correlation is not a good measure of anything. Now, this is kind of shocking. No one, you have to do more than calculate the correlation. We need to look at distributions of data, XY plot distributions. So model regression analysis, structural equation modeling focuses on whether or not the size of the net effect relations differ from 0, not on predicting an interval outcome. So what you do in regression, structural equation modeling, is compare the relative size of your betas, and you talk about what's more important, X or Z or L in a model. That's not a good way of thinking. The question is, let me ask you a question. Say you're a woman for a second. Beautiful young woman like Gazda here, and you're looking to marry a guy, and what's more important, a guy that's handsome or not violent? And that's not a good question, because typically a woman would want to have both conditions in a man. He's not going to punch you in the face, and he's pretty easy on the eyes. He's a good-looking guy. Both. Looking at relative importance is not a very good way of thinking. You need to think in terms of having several conditions where the case is high on each of the conditions. For example, high on being handsome and high on being not violent. Not violent. All right, those are. Would that be sufficient? No, you want 2 or 3 more things too. You like him to maybe have a little money would be nice, and maybe a decent education, Maybe he doesn't drink a lot of alcohol, which would be nice. So how many conditions do you want for a model to be sufficient to be high on Y? And the answer is around 5. 5 principal conditions. All right, and that's from finding a mate to to measuring purchase, whether or not the case is going to buy something or visit your country or visit your city. So by focusing on the relative importance of rival variables, the correlation approach has difficulty treating cases as configurations and examining combinations of variables. We want to think in terms of recipes, not relative importance of variables. You know, it's so awful. It's hard to believe that we've gotten into this trouble. And this trouble is pervasive in science today. That's what Deirdre McCloskey talks about, unspeakable. It makes me unspeakably sad. You know, she's a crusty old lady. I mean, she's a wonderful scientist. You know, she's kind of angry and sad about this situation. So instead of looking at the unique contribution of the variables, holding the other ones constant, we don't want to do that. And so there's additional reasons here. And another one is that a low or high value of any independent variable is insufficient by itself for accurately indicating a high-low outcome condition. I just told you the example of one or even two conditions is typically not sufficient. You need about 5 conditions to accurately predict an outcome occurring. 5 conditions. The outcome, by the way, could be a negative outcome. We could predict why a person is not visiting a destination, or why somebody does not buy. It could be typically what is sufficient is accurately predicted by about 5 conditions in a recipe. So we have antecedent conditions and outcome conditions. And it takes about 5 antecedent conditions in a recipe to predict an outcome, about 5. By the way, the prediction, accurate prediction, does not indicate necessity. You could have another set of 5, another complex recipe, not just one recipe. Typically, your data will have 4 or 5 really substantive recipes in it. Let me give you a quick example. Do you like anchovies on your pizza? Do you like anchovies on your pizza? Well, I do, but I don't want every pizza to have anchovies on it. I want to have some pizzas that don't have any anchovies on it. I would get tired of eating anchovy pizza every time I had a pizza. But what I'm trying to say here is that we have, there's multiple recipes that will work to give you a very satisfied outcome, okay? So, and this is called the equal finality principle, equal finality, all right? That there's multiple solutions that will give you a certain outcome. And so a model can be sufficient, but not necessary. This is a huge, shocking idea that we need to measure a few recipes, not just one recipe. Another one is that multiple regression analysis cannot handle interaction effects very well. If you have a 3-way interaction, it's hard to tell what's high and what's low in the interaction. You have to actually do XY plots. But it's easy to tell what's high and low in an asymmetric model. In fact, one of the main scholars on asymmetric model, his name is Lofty Zeta, and he refers to this as computing with words, computing with words. And here's an example. Let's go back to the example of looking for someone to marry. You're a woman and you're looking for someone to marry. And you say to your friends, I found him. he's wonderful. And they say, well, what's so wonderful about him? Well, he's handsome, and he doesn't hit me, and he doesn't drink very much. He'll have one glass of wine a night, and he's also religious like me. You know, I mean, we go to religious ceremony, but he's not crazy. I mean, he's not out of his mind religious. And so what you do is you describe him in several conditions. Now think about that. You're computing with words, and you can think of asymmetric modeling as computing with words. And so the guy who said this, his name is Lofty Zeta, Z-A-D-E-H, and he's really the god of asymmetric modeling. He has one article that has 100,000 citations, published in 1965. And he's Iranian. He's Iranian. He lived to 102. He died about 10 years ago. What's his name? Lofty Zeta, Z-A-D-E-H. Unbelievable scholar. So look, regression analysis works quite well for fit validity, fit. It does better than asymmetric modeling. Asymmetric model would be like take the best and making a decision, and then, but regression does not work very well in predictive validity. And predictive validity is a huge contribution to science. In your research, you should have a holdout sample or a second sample, and you take the model from one set of data and predict the outcome for a second set of data, and that's called predictive validation. And it's a very, very powerful way of analyzing data and what we should do. And but it's not typically done. If you say you take 20 studies published in the leading journals, any of the leading journals, and typically 19 out of the 20 journals will not do predictive validation. Remember what predictive validation is. You have separate samples and you model each separately. Then you take the model from one set of data and you test it whether or not it's any good on the second set of data. So for example, I have a recent paper, we submitted it 4 days ago to a journal, and it had data from China and Korea, separate data. Now, the worst thing you can do is combine the data from the two samples. So there were Koreans, of course, South Korea, Koreans and Chinese. And so what we did was we computed models from each set of data, and this was in a hospitality study of sustainable fashion brands. I'm sorry, it wasn't hospitality per se, but it was on purchasing sustainable fashion brands. And the point here is you don't want to combine sets of data. If you have separate samples, you should model each and see if the model works on the other sets of data. And that's called predictive validity. And if you do predictive validation, you'll see that asymmetric models outperform symmetric models. So predictive validity is testing a model using data from a second sample and seeing if it works on the model from one set of data on the other sets of data that you have. And you'll find that asymmetric models work much more accurately than symmetric models in predictive validation. All right. By the way, it's also important to recognize that the causes of a low score outcome are quite different than the causes for a high score outcome. So the reason, for example, of not buying my typically include different recipes in the recipes for buying. And And another guy, Carl Wick, and his colleagues point out that the reasons for high reliable organizations, called HRO, high reliability organizations, are different than high profit organizations. And so that's another reason. Asymmetric model, you can model low outcomes by simply taking the negation of the low outcome as your predictive model. And typically you have to have two sets of models in your data analysis when you do asymmetric modeling. So this is what senior managers really want from a model. They seek accurate predictions of specific points, such as, for example, high profits relative to sales, than variable directional relationships. And these are examples of what we can measure using asymmetric model. Now, you can't do away with multicollinearity in your data. And this is a problem with multiple regression analysis, because you could have two independent variables that are correlated. And if they're highly correlated, one will end up being in the model and the other will drop out from the model because its variation is already covered by the first independent variable. This is a big problem in data analysis. It looks like one variable is not relevant to your outcome variable, when actually it is, but because of multicollinearity, it's not part of your analysis, because you're using something you should never use, and that is stepwise regression modeling. And Armstrong makes the point, when should you use stepwise regression modeling? The answer is never. So look, you should always use predictive validation, but there's thousands of studies that don't use it. And you know, some of this may be going over your head, but I hope you get a feeling that you got to learn to enjoy data analysis. And there's certain things that will help you do that. And one of the things that will help you do that is to look at the first edition of Kurlinger and Pedhauser. And I would say the first edition is the one to look at, because there's no requirement for you to know matrix algebra. It's a very simple book on regression analysis. Look, well, there is such a thing as contrarian relationships, that you have people who dislike your brand but continue to buy it. That's a contrarian relationship. Why would anybody who dislikes your brand continue to buy it? Well, you can measure that, where the outcome is dislike and buy, the combination of dislike and buy. And we tend to ignore contrarian relationships, but we really should study them. So I would recommend that you do that. And I'll show you why that's necessary in a second. So look, and that's called four-corner analysis. Four-corner analysis, instead of asking, is there a positive relationship between X and Y? That's not good enough. The real issue is, when does high X give you high Y? When does low X give you high Y? When does high X give you low Y? And when does low X give you low Y? So look, there's actually four sets of subsets of data in your data set. When high X relates to high Y, and then the other three, high X relates to low Y. And if you're going to get into this data analysis, you need to think much more deeply than just variable directional relationships. So look, here's a study. It's bad. All right, who did the study? My colleague and I did this study, and it's an example of bad science practice published in an A-level journal, and I'll send it to you if you'd like to read it. And this is a hospitality study where in casinos, and Kathy Prentice worked for casinos as a consultant. This is in the biggest casino venue in the world, which is where? What city is #1 in casinos in the world globally?
Macau or Las Vegas?
I'm sorry, what is it?
Macau or Las Vegas? Which one?
Yeah, it's Macau. Macau is 4 times bigger than Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Okay, Macau. So this study was done in Macau with 9 casinos, and it was published in Psychology Market. I'll send it to you. But here's an example of bad research. But I mean, it shows variable directional relationships. And we're looking at problem gambling, which is considered a disease. You have a disease, mental disease, you're a problem gambler. And we hypothesized that problem gambling would relate positively with evaluation of services, okay? The quality of service, responsiveness, appealing facilities, positive. People who are problem gambling and they're in the casinos all the time, these are mainly Chinese customers. 97% of the gamblers in Macau casinos are Chinese, okay? Because gambling in China itself is illegal, pretty much all illegal. But they go to Macau, which is also China, but it's a special district of China. It's right across from Hong Kong, okay? So look, the question becomes, are these predictions correct? It turns out they're not correct. Instead of positive relationships, they're mostly negative. And so we'll talk about that in a second. But then the question becomes, what are the antecedents to problem gambling? And this is in the model, like age. You have to have some years of gambling to develop a problem. You don't have a problem when you're 22 years old, typically, though you can find problem gamblers who are very young. But the ones at the bottom are marketing variables, like having a reward card. Casinos in Macau have a reward card. You get certain benefits by using the card every time you gamble, the length of time at the tables and so forth. And then the average bet size, positive, has a positive relationship with problem gambling. Now the global outcomes is, who do you say is your first choice? This casino is my first choice. If you evaluate it positively, you have a positive evaluation of the outcome. Another one would be word of mouth, and propensity to switch should be lower if you have a positive overall evaluation. So look, SES in marketing, SES is status, education, socioeconomic status characteristics, and down at the bottom is marketing characteristics, such as in previous behavior, average bet size, length of play, and visit hours, number of annual visits. China controls the number of visits, but you can visit more than once. You might be able to get there 3 or 4 times a year. And then this is evaluating the services, and then this is the outcomes. All right, so that's the model. And look what we found here. I don't know what to do about that, but we found negative relationship. Problem gambling has a negative relationship. And that might be, problem gamblers are kind of miserable view of themselves and of their addiction. And they say, this is a dump. I'm so unhappy about the services here. And so you have this negative beta coefficients here, okay? And then age is positive as we predicted. Income is positive. The reward system is positive effect on problem gambling. And average bet size is positive. Length of play, positive. Number of visits, as you would expect, would be positive. You get to experience your addiction by visiting often. But look, I'm saying to you that this type of analysis is not deep enough. And what we went back and we redid the analysis using asymmetric modeling. So this is a second paper, same data, a couple years later by Woodside, Prentice, and we added an author, a student who was taking a course, and so I included the student on the study. He was from Copenhagen. And this entitled Revisiting Problem Gamblers' Harsh Gaze on Casino Services, Applying Complexity Theory to Identify Exceptional Customers. So this is an example of good science practice. I'll be happy to send this to you. And so we're looking at recipes instead of the relative size of the impact of different variables. And so this was published in the same journal. And the editor said, wait a minute, I can't publish this. You've already used the data. And I said, well, yeah, but the theory is different and the analysis is different and the findings are different. And the editor said, okay, I'll publish it. It's a very good paper, but you're going to have to put revisiting in the title. And what did I say? I said, okay. I said, sure, I'll put revisiting in the title. So revisiting in the title is because we're using the same data, all right? But now the theory looks like this. Please move this window, good. Sorry about that. I'm gonna move it there for a second, okay? All right, so look, we have age, gender, education, income, and occupation. Now let me say something about this. These are called socioeconomic status characteristics. Most researchers will collect these types of data and then not use them in model building. That's a big mistake. That's a big mistake. Listen to what I'm telling you here. You want to model this information. That information typically affects your independent variables, or in this case, your recipes that you're thinking are going to affect these could affect your bet size. There could be an arrow from here to here. These are your marketing and usage conditions, and where A is annual visits, it's actually high annual visits. You know, it's a condition of high. The negation of annual visits would be low annual visits. Anyway, you got two sets of data affecting problem gambling, and then problem gambling affecting evaluations here, and then these are the ultimate outcomes over here. And so, look, let me mention to you what we found. And we found actually subsets of cases of customers, and here's a case where this is problem gambling. Problem gambling has a negative impact on service evaluations, but there is a group of problem gambling where high problem gambling gives a high evaluation of services, and the condition that is being predicted here is first choice, casino first choice as first choice. And so this is a combination of service evaluations as well as problem gambling evaluations, where the model works quite well. The consistency is 0.91. So what that means is, if you have a problem gambler, this subset, there's 4 subsets of customers. One subset is high in problem gambling, high in a service quality evaluation, low in up-to-date facilities. This is a dump, but I love it. And then high in service restaurants, and then high in employee care, high in quality of the games, and high in food and beverages. All right, that is the set of antecedent conditions that result in high evaluation of being a casino first choice. The point I want to make to you here is that among problem gamblers, there's 4 types of problem gamblers who are high in problem gambling, but there's 3 that are low in problem gambling. So so instead of saying that high problem gambling associates with low evaluation, it's actually can be high evaluation, but you have to look at the subsets of customers. And you would do that through recipes, all right? And so that's an example of applying recipes in hospitality research. And here's an example of bad science practice in tourism theory and analysis. This is one of the I'll move this down here. This was published in the Journal of Travel Research, which is an A-star journal in tourism. And this is a general model of travel destination choice and traveler destination choice. This was published a long time ago and has like 1,500 citations. It's one of my most cited publications. And I'm pointing out that this is actually bad science practice. Bad science practice. That's kind of a shocking thing. You know, I didn't know back when I wrote this and co-authored this with Steve Lazonsky that it was going to be bad, but it's bad today because it's symmetric modeling. And so, and it's bad for the reasons I mentioned. Okay, so here's what it looks like, and this is what I'm suggesting to you, that makes it bad, this idea of looking at this as a symmetric model. And it, one of the contributions of this study is it looks at four different sets of awareness, consideration set, and the inert set. You may be aware of it, but you don't relate it to choice and visits. And the inept set is the destinations that you have decided you would not visit, and unavailable, but aware you might be like to visit, but you view them as not available to you. Anyway, this has been the foundation article for and used by lots of scholars, and I make the point that we ought to go deeper, and this isn't a study done after that. It's good practice, this theory, and this uses a general assistance framework. And this study, my co-author is Robert McDonald, and was published in 1993. And this is what the model looks like. And if you're going to do tourism research, I would suggest that you collect demographic information, family and group influence information, and also marketing influences, and collect all these types of data in your research, destination choice data, including places you considered but did not actually choose, accommodation decisions, activity choices, attraction choices, the routes and mode of travel at the destination, to the destination, then at the destination, eating choices and gift choices and other durable purchases, and then measuring preferences, satisfaction, and let's see if I can get rid of this here. Sorry. And then intentions too. This is intentions before the trip and intentions after the trip is over. And I actually, with McDonald, we actually collected this data in something called the long interview method and I provide references for the long interview method in the paper. And so this is the paper on visits to Bangladesh, specifically Cox's Bazar. Cox's Bazar is a 120-mile beach, contains a 120-mile beach area, 180 kilometers in Bangladesh, looking at it from the point of view of recipes. This is not published yet. I'm planning on publishing it within a year, and hopefully a very good journal. And this is assessment of the destination using recipes of socioeconomic and status configurations, and then measuring satisfaction based upon evaluations of the destination, which is Cox's Bazar, but using an asymmetric modeling instead of symmetric modeling. And this is Cox's Bazar. I never heard of Cox's Bazar before working on this project with my colleagues from Bangladesh. And this is the very long beach area in this area within Bangladesh. And so I would recommend that you consider doing four-corner analysis. And I had briefly mentioned four-corner analysis to you, what I mean by that. And let me just mention to you, this is simply a crosstab based upon quintile, taking the original score and dividing your cases into discretizing by very low, low, medium, high, and very high. This is destination loyalty quintiles, and this is satisfaction with the visit quintile. So think of loyalty here as a measure of intention to return to the destination, and satisfaction of your current trip from very low to very high. So we had a fairly large sample of 602. And what I want to point out is that the phi coefficient is significant. So we have a positive linear relationship. But for the big thing is that we actually have four subsets of data. We have people who are very satisfied, who intend to return, these people here, which is a total of 120, 160, 170 people. And then we have people who are dissatisfied, who intend not to return, these people here. So that's another 170 people here. But notice we also have some people who are going to be coming back. There's less of these people than on the right, who are dissatisfied but are coming back. So these are negative satisfaction, high loyalty cases. So these are contrarian to what you would expect. So there's 11% of the sample was here. And then down here, we have people who are very happy, but who will not come back. So this is 6.6%, 40 cases. So we can actually model these four sets of subset of cases as outcomes: satisfied, loyal, dissatisfied, loyal, then not loyal, but satisfied. And this is not satisfied and not loyal. Now there's a professor of strategic management who points out that the real action in theory, improvement, and advancement is contrarian cases. So would you not like to learn about people who are dissatisfied but are coming back? Maybe it's because they have family there who live close to the, I don't know. But the point is, it's not enough to just look at the people in the linear relationship. It's not enough to talk about satisfaction associates with loyalty. The real issue is, when does satisfaction associate with disloyalty, and when does low satisfaction associate with high loyalty? So that's what we like to study. And so I would suggest you shift away from thinking in terms of linear thinking and think in terms of asymmetric modeling. And in the paper on good practices, shifting from bad to good practices, I cover lots of these specific points that I've mentioned here today. How to go about doing the shift from bad to good. If you build some of these in, if you shift to point estimates, and if you shift to testing using separate samples, so you instead of think about repeating the study over again, to actually taking data from one sample and test its usefulness and prediction on a second set of data, and the reverse of that, you're going to increase the value of your paper and very much increase the acceptability of your paper, acceptance for publication. So I'd like to thank you for your attention today, and I'm going to recommend that if you'd like to read more, I'll be happy to send you these two books. I'll send you electronic copies of The Complexity Turn, as well as Accurate Case Outcome. I've written or co-authored every chapter in these two books. The Accurate Case Outcome Modeling came out 2 years ago, and Complexity Turn came out about 4 years ago. And just drop me a note and I'll send you these books. And if you want some of the other papers that we talked about, I'll be happy to send them to you as well. And so I'm going to stop here, and let's see here.
Okay, thank you, Arch.
Yeah, and I'd like to try to get out of this here.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so look, if I look forward to hearing from you, and possibly someday, if we all live long enough, to actually do some work together, possibly. If we have time for a question or two, I promise you I'll keep the answer under 60 seconds.
Thank you, Archibald. It's a wonderful presentation, also lecture, and it's very detailed. So I'm sure it will be, I think, more useful for young colleagues and generations. And the most of our audience, I think, is coming from the tourism field. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions? If you have any questions, either you can just text it, or you can, open your microphone and speak loudly. Any questions? Let me ask the first question, Arch. You also publish a number of papers in tourism journals, and you are also very familiar with the tourism academia. What do you think about the academia or the quality of publications in tourism field? So, what do you think about the weaknesses of publications that we have in tourism hospitality journals? Why we cannot publish more much stronger papers? Why we cannot get more citations? You just emphasized in the beginning of your presentation that we have more publications but less citations. So I know some you somehow partially responded to this question, but you may have some more perhaps things to say as an answer.
Yeah, well, I think it's very helpful. Anatolia is a very good journal. It comes out of Turkey, and you've been the editor. Are you the current editor, Anatolia? Yeah. So I would, I think it's very helpful that you take time to read Anatolia, as well as the other leading journals in tourism too, like Tourism Management, Annals of Tourism Research, Journal of Travel Research, International Journal of Hospitality. At least look at them, and if you have the opportunity to work with colleagues at if you're given the opportunity to read articles by the top scholars in the field, I think you should at least read one or two of them. And you can write to them and say, could we work together on a paper? And that usually is worth doing. I wish I could get back here and fix the screen here. I'm not sure how to do that. But be active, go to meetings. When you're at meetings, actually attend the conferences. Actually attend the sessions. Just don't go and stand around in the lobby. When we get back to the time when after COVID is not such a serious problem, and we actually attend meetings again. But listen, do feel free to contact me if you have a question. I typically review 1 or 2 papers a week from young researchers who ask me some questions about their papers that they're submitting. I'm happy to do that, and just reach out to senior scholars, and typically they're nice people too, and they'll respond to your request.
Okay, Arch. The question is from Ana Isabel from Portugal. You know her?
Yes.
Ana Isabel Rodriguez. She's also very strong especially in qualitative research methods. So her question is about, based on your long experience in research, what could be your advice for doing good and interesting research in tourism studies?
Well, the type of thing I'm saying, make sure you have a foundation in regression analysis as well as asymmetric modeling. And it's the idea of the first edition of Kurlinger is very important. Something that you have a hands-on ability in regression analysis and hands-on ability in asymmetric modeling. you have to know the basics, and it's kind of hard to do good research if if you haven't learned a bit of analytics. So you want to have good foundation courses in handling data, not just qualitative research is fine, but there's a way to combine qualitative with quantitative modeling, and that is you use case-based modeling, which is asymmetric analysis. And you can't skip the step of learning how to get information out of a data matrix, out of an Excel file. So you know, and then having some training in writing sentences and writing papers is one of the best ways to do that is to work with a good scholar. Like in Turkey, working with you would be an honor and a privilege. And you can't work with 150 students at the same time on an individual basis. But amazingly, few students actually ask for the privilege. And so the ones that do usually are at a tremendous advantage. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking on that now. But those are the types of things. And listen, on Kurlinger and Penhauser, the first edition, that's Kerlinger, Kurlinger. It's the brown covered book. It cost about $5 on Amazon and $10 for shipping. And it's easy to read, and it has numerical examples with all the cases, all the data in the book. And unfortunately, you have to learn data analysis on your own. I mean, your courses typically are not very good. That's, I think, globally true. You have to actually learn to do the basics on your own. And but you know, I have found that certain articles and certain books have changed my life. And Kurlinger and Penhauser is one, and then another one is Seymour Banks, Experimentation in Marketing, 1965. It's like my #1 book in my life. I mean, some people might say the Bible. I would say Experimentation in Marketing by Seymour Banks, and Banks. And it's a fabulous book because it has numerical examples. At some point, if you're going to become an academic, you have to get comfortable with data.
Okay. So Archer, let me ask another question. Perhaps this can be the last question in the session. So looking at the future, what would be your advice to use? Which methods do you think look brighter than others? Or,
yeah.
Qualitative or something more, technological things?
Right. Well, look, most professors use one method for 3 to 4 decades. Craig Thompson, that's what he does. He uses CCT, consumer culture theory. I'd like to use different methods on different studies in different decades. I have a book entitled Case Study Research. I'll be happy to send it to you for free, an electronic copy of the first edition. The second edition is published, but I don't have an electronic copy available. But I'll send you the first edition, and I cover about 12 methods in it, in depth, 12 methods, from qualitative and quantitative. And you can have it for free. Just ask me for it. And the title of the book is Case Study Research. Mm-hmm. So I would think it's a more exciting life if you learn how to do different methods, like the long interview method and TAT, thematic apperception. So So don't spend your whole life, 30, 40 years, 50 years using one method.
Okay, so the question is from yes, Samurai from Turkey. Do you think the rankings or citation statistics will be reset soon?
Repeat the question, please.
Well, the question is, I think the rankings or citations, the statistics about rankings and citations will be reset. So it will be, I think, changed or will be reconsidered in a different version. I think this is the question.
Yeah,
there will be a kind of any change or revision in using our ranking or citation models.
For citations, I still don't understand the question, Meetan.
Well, we are using different statistics, to rank, articles. Most of them are based on citations and so on. So I think the question is, there could be a kind of different criteria to rank papers or something else, I think.
By citations, yeah. Well,
other than citation.
Listen, deans don't use, as far as my experience is, deans don't consider citations very important. What's important to deans is placement. What journals did you place in? And if you're in tourism and hospitality, publishing in the top journals is what's important, not the number of citations. And so, in the #1 journal today in evaluation is TM, Tourism Management, and Annals of Tourism is certainly one of the older journals. The oldest is Journal of Travel Research, which is still an A*, but it's no longer a first or second. It's one of the 6 or 7 A* journals. But I'm saying at some point you want to think about having people read your papers. It would be try to write so that is valuable for yourself as well as to other scholars. Mintzberg's, Henry Mintzberg, well-known strategic management professor, said that the first reason for writing is to please yourself.
It's the most important thing in our life.
Well, yeah, he says the first reason, I write to, clarify my own thinking. And I would say for myself, some of my best writing has been in the past 10 years. I've been writing now for 50 years, and my last 10 years have been my biggest impact years. And
Arch, you publish more than, I think you have been able to publish more than 450 papers. So did you enjoy when you write, these papers?
Yeah, I'm still enjoying it. Yeah. So, it's been, it's all good. It's all very good. And it's satisfying to have some impact globally. And I have that now more than ever. And I've been on this kick now for past 10 years, especially to help people switch from bad science practice to good science practice.
Okay. Gözde, well, your favorite girl here, Gözde, she's asking about the role of big data in the future.
What in the future? What?
The role of big data.
Big data.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's very, very relevant, very important, particularly if you do more than just do correlations and structural equation modeling. If going deeper into big data, I think the whole issue is studying what if and the use of Bayesian analysis instead of matrix algebra.
So what do you think, Arch? So let's say in the next 5-10 years, when we use more big data analysis, more bigger capacity of, data sets in our, research on consumer behavior, marketing, and so on. And when it helps us to, to sort these things, the complex models to make them, easier. Do you think that all these publications that we publish today, the papers, will be useless or rubbish in the next 5, 10, or 20 years?
Yeah, I think it's finally changing over from rubbish will continue to be used, but also at the same time, good practices will be used as well. So you'll have to have, and I have a paper published about 8 years ago that gets referenced 20, 30 times each year, which is a lot for each year, where I have both SEM and asymmetric models in the same paper. And that's I think you're going to see that more and more, the combination of variable-based modeling with case-based modeling in the same papers. And I think that's the solution.
One more question from Ferial. She's asking about why there is a bad practice and good practice.
Yeah, well, I try to answer that because bad practice has been used since the 1950s, and it's what's taught. Most professors teach using symmetric modeling, which is bad practice. And even though the leading authorities, like American Statistical Association, tell us that this is it's not good, but it's not good sufficiently to say, well, this is bad. You have to say, well, what should I do? Well, you have to provide answers of what you should do. And this is in the 2019 paper on accurate case outcome modeling. I have both bad and good in the same paper. And that's an Opus paper, the 2019 on accurate case outcome modeling in economic psychology and marketing. And that's receiving a lot of attention. That's being read by over 1,000 scholars per week. I get data on that. And so it's having a lot of buzz. It's gone viral, as they say.
Mm-hmm. I think there's more, another question, which is more practical, I think, from Nihir. She's asking about what do you think about the future of digital marketing? If it changes the industry or tourist or consumer behavior, because there are a number of, increasing.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two, you can break down the PhDs into 3 or 4 categories. Those that require two years of additional coursework, and those that are HD or hot higher degree by research. And a long time ago, 200 years ago, PhDs were you took typically 5 to 10 years as an apprentice under one person. That's the old British PhD. I don't think that is very strong, and a lot of British have moved toward requiring coursework. So I think the model where you have coursework of 2 years and then typically an additional 2 years to do is stronger than it's deeper and it's tougher to do that type of a PhD.
I think the question is about digitalization. How digitalization or digital marketing may influence consumer behavior or the future, the behavior of future people.
Yeah, well, I think joint training in consumer research and marketing, research and marketing go together quite well. You can get a degree in consumer psychology out of a psych department, a PhD, and that would be related but separate type of training.
Okay, so do you have any questions? Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's almost 2 hours. Well, I think that's enough, Josh. Thank you very much. I don't want to push you too much.
Well, no, thank you so much. And I hope to hear from your colleagues, your junior colleagues. You know, again, if you'd like to have any of this material or the book, case study research, or the other books, I'll send them to you for free. Yeah. I mean, that's the best offer I can make.
You also published a book on case study. I know it's a wonderful book. I got one copy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
bye
you.
Now. Bye bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye bye, everyone.